The pen hovered over the settlement papers. Natalie hadn't spoken a single word in 4 hours. Her husband, Greg, was grinning like a shark who just smelled blood. He thought he had won. He thought he was walking away with the tech empire, the Hamptons estate, and the Swiss accounts, leaving her with nothing but a used Volvo and her dignity. The judge raised his gavel to finalize the divorce. "If there are no further objections," he began. The courtroom was dead silent, until a heavy oak door at the back didn't just open, it slammed against the wall. A man in a charcoal suit stood there. He wasn't a lawyer. He was the man who owned the bank Greg's money was in, and he had one sentence that would change everything. The fluorescent lights of the Manhattan family court hummed with a low, irritating buzz, the only sound accompanying the scratching of a pen. Natalie Ford sat at the defendant's table. Her posture rigid, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a simple navy dress off the rack, at least 3 seasons old. Across the aisle, her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, Greg Pembroke, leaned back in his leather chair. He checked his Rolex Submariner for the 3rd time in a minute, sighing theatrically. "Your Honor," Greg's lawyer, Simon Kress, said, smoothing out his silk tie. Kress was known in New York circles as the Butcher of Broadway for how he carved up spouses in divorce settlements. "My client has been exceedingly patient. Mrs. Pembroke has refused to engage with counsel, refused to counteroffer, and has remained mute since these proceedings began at 9:00 a.m. We interpret this silence as acquiescence to the terms presented." The judge, an exhausted man named Judge Holloway, who had seen too many broken marriages to care about one more, peered over his spectacles at Natalie. "Mrs. Pembroke," the judge asked, his voice gravelly, "do you understand the terms laid out before you? You are waiving your right to spousal support. You are waiving your claim to the Pembroke Dynamics shares. You are accepting the 2018 Honda Accord and the rental lease on the apartment in Queens." Natalie didn't blink. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at Greg. She simply stared at the mahogany grain of the table in front of her. After a long, suffocating pause, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Greg let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. He leaned over to Kress, whispering loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I told you, she's broken. She knows she's worthless without me." Greg Pembroke was the golden boy of the tech world. At 34, he was the CEO of Pembroke Dynamics, a company specializing in high-frequency trading algorithms. He had been on the cover of Forbes. He drove a McLaren. And for the last 3 years of their 5-year marriage, he had treated Natalie like a piece of furniture he was embarrassed to own. "Very well." Judge Holloway sighed, reaching for his stamp. "If the respondent has no objections, I see no reason to drag this out. The court finds the settlement equitable, given the equitable." The word was whispered, but it cut through the room like a razor wire. It wasn't Natalie who spoke. Greg froze. He looked around. "Did she say something?" Natalie remained a statue. "I didn't hear anything," Kress muttered, sliding the final decree towards the judge. "Sign it, Your Honor. Let's get lunch at Le Bernardin." The judge raised his hand. "Hold on." The air in the courtroom shifted. The humidity seemed to drop, replaced by a sudden biting chill. The heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom, which had been locked to ensure privacy for this high-profile case, groaned. They didn't just open. They were pushed aside with a slow, deliberate weight. Standing in the threshold was a man who looked out of place in a municipal building. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than the judge's annual salary, bespoke Italian wool charcoal grey. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair swept back and eyes that looked like chips of flint. He didn't carry a briefcase. He didn't have a lawyer with him. He held only a single, thin manila folder. Greg squinted, shielding his eyes from the hallway light behind the stranger. "Who is this?" "We have a closed session." Simon Cress, usually unflappable, went pale. He stood up, knocking his expensive pen onto the floor. "Mr. Blackwood." The name sent a ripple of confusion through the room. Greg frowned. "Blackwood. Who cares? Get him out of here, bailiff." But the bailiff didn't move. The bailiff was staring at the man with wide eyes. Harrison Blackwood walked down the center aisle. His footsteps were rhythmic, heavy-sounding like a clock counting down. He didn't look at Greg. He didn't look at the lawyer. He stopped directly behind Natalie's chair. He placed one hand on the back of her seat, a gesture of protection. "I apologize for the tardiness, Your Honor," Harrison Blackwood said. His voice was a rich baritone, smooth, but carrying an undercurrent of absolute authority. "Traffic on the bridge was murder, and my helicopter pilot is out sick." Judge Holloway took off his glasses. His hands were shaking slightly. "Mr. Harrison Blackwood, the venture capitalist?" "Among other things," Harrison said. Greg stood up, his face flushing red. "I don't care if you're the Pope. This is a private divorce hearing. You have no standing here. Get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." Harrison finally looked at Greg. It was the way a lion looks at a limping gazelle, with bored curiosity. "Mr. Pembroke, you're Greg Wright, the visionary behind Pembroke Dynamics." "Damn right I am," Greg snapped, adjusting his jacket. "And I'm about to be a single man with $1 billion valuation. So whatever investment pitch you have, save it for my secretary." Harrison smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. $1 billion valuation. Interesting number. Is that based on the Q3 earnings report you filed with the SEC last week? Greg's arrogance faltered for a split second. "Yes. Public record." "What of it?" Harrison opened the thin manila folder. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the aisle. It stopped perfectly at the edge of Greg's table. "That's odd," Harrison said softly. "Because according to the real owner of the intellectual property, Pembroke Dynamics is built on—" "You don't own the algorithm, Greg. You're essentially leasing it. And the lease expired." Harrison checked his Patek Philippe watch. 10 minutes ago. The courtroom fell into a silence so deep you could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit on the roof. Greg snatched the paper. His eyes scanned it, and his face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. This is fake," Greg stammered. "This is a forgery. The Core X algorithm is mine. I wrote it in my dorm room." "Did you?" Harrison asked. He turned his gaze down to Natalie. For the first time all morning, Natalie moved. She slowly lifted her head. The meek, broken housewife facade didn't crack. It simply evaporated. Her shoulders straightened. She turned to look at Greg, and her eyes were dry cold and devastatingly clear. "No, Greg," Natalie said, her voice steady. "You were playing video games in your dorm room. I wrote the code while you were asleep, and I didn't give it to you. I licensed it to a shell company in the Caymans, a company owned by Mr. Blackwood here." Greg looked between his wife and the billionaire. "What, you don't know how to code? You're a graphic designer. You made menus for restaurants." "I made you think that," Natalie said, standing up. She looked taller now. "Because I loved you, and I didn't want my wealth to intimidate you. But you didn't just take the money, Greg. You took my life. You cheated. You lied. And you tried to leave me with nothing. She turned to Harrison Blackwood. Uncle Harrison, is the car waiting? Greg's jaw dropped. Uncle, Harrison Blackwood offered Natalie his arm. It is, my dear. The Rolls is out front. Wait, Simon Cress shrieked, scrambling for his papers. Your Honor, we object. This is an ambush. Material evidence withheld. Harrison turned back, his hand on the courtroom door. It's not withheld, Mr. Cress. It was in the prenup. There was no prenup, Greg screamed. We never signed one. You didn't, Harrison corrected. But the corporation you signed your employment contract with did. Clause 14, Section B. In the event of moral turpitude or infidelity, all intellectual property rights revert to the primary shareholder. Harrison pointed a finger at Natalie. Her. This hearing isn't over, Judge Holloway stammered, trying to regain control. Oh, the divorce is over, Judge, Harrison said. She signed the papers. She wants nothing from him. No alimony, no house, no car. Harrison looked at Greg one last time. Because as of right now, Mr. Pembroke, you are technically unemployed and you are being sued for corporate espionage by Blackwood Holdings. I'd save that money for a criminal defense attorney if I were you. Come, Natalie. And with that, they walked out. But the story didn't end in the parking lot. That was just the prologue. Because Greg Pembroke wasn't the type of man to lose $1 billion without a fight, and he knew something about Natalie that Harrison Blackwood didn't. The ride in the Rolls-Royce Phantom was quiet. The sound of New York City traffic was reduced to a distant hum behind the bulletproof glass. Natalie leaned back into the plush leather, closing her eyes. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the courtroom showdown was fading, replaced by a hollow exhaustion. You did well, Nat, Harrison said gently, opening a chilled bottle of water and handing it to her. Stoic, dignified. Your mother would have been proud. Natalie took the water, her hands trembling slightly. He looked so small, Harrison. When you told him about the IP rights, for 5 years he's walked around like a giant. But without the money, without the company, he's just a boy who cheated on his wife. Harrison nodded, his face hardening. Men like Greg Pembroke are built on sand. They mistake luck for genius and cruelty for strength. But we need to be careful. A man like that, stripped of his ego, he becomes dangerous. He signed the papers, Natalie said, looking out the window as they passed Central Park. It's done. The marriage is done, Harrison corrected. The war for the assets is just starting. Simon Cress is a weasel, but he's a smart weasel. He'll find a loophole. He'll argue that you commingled assets, or that the moral turpitude clause is unenforceable in New York State. Natalie turned to him. But the Cayman structure holds right, that's ironclad. It is, Harrison assured her. But Greg has allies, investors, people who have a lot of money riding on Pembroke dynamics not collapsing, specifically the Russian consortium that bought 15% of the company last month. Natalie's blood ran cold. He let the Volkov group in. I told him not to touch their money. I told him explicitly. He didn't listen, Harrison said grimly. Greed makes people deaf. And now that the algorithm, the product they paid for, is legally yours, they aren't going to be looking for Greg. They're going to be looking for the person holding the keys. Natalie stared at her reflection in the dark window. She wasn't just a divorcee anymore. She was a target. Meanwhile, back at the courthouse, chaos had erupted. Greg Pembroke was pacing the hallway, his face a mask of sweat and fury. He kicked a trash can, sending it clattering against the wall. Passers-by gave him a wide berth. Fix this." "Simon," Greg roared at his lawyer. "You told me she was a nobody. You told me her family was dead, orphan from Ohio. You said Simon Kress was furiously typing on his BlackBerry. That's what her background check said. Natalie Ford, born in Dayton. Parents died in a car crash in '98. There was no mention of Harrison Blackwood. There was no mention of Blackwood Holdings. Well, clearly your background check guy is an idiot." Greg grabbed Kress by the lapels. "That was Harrison Blackwood. The man owns half of Midtown. If he says he owns my algorithm, the stock price is going to zero by the time the market opens tomorrow. I have margin calls. Simon, I have the Volkov debt." Kress pushed Greg away, smoothing his suit. "Calm down. Panic is expensive. We need to find the link. Why is Blackwood involved? He called her niece or something." "Uncle. She never mentioned an uncle." Greg spat. "She never mentioned any family. She was just quiet. Always sketching in her notebooks. I thought she was drawing flowers or some crap." Greg stopped pacing. A memory flashed in his mind. Late nights, their apartment in Tribeca. He would come home drunk from a client dinner, which usually meant cocktails with his mistress, a 22-year-old model named Chloe. He would find Natalie asleep on the sofa, a notebook open on her chest. He had never looked at the notebooks, not once. He assumed they were grocery lists or doodles. "The notebooks," Greg whispered. "What?" Kress asked. "She kept journals, dozens of them. She left them in the apartment when I kicked her out last week. She only took one suitcase." Greg's eyes widened. A twisted grin began to form on his face. "She thinks she's smart," Greg said, his voice dropping to a sinister register. "She played the long game, the silent partner. But she made a mistake. She left the source code behind." "If those notebooks contain the original handwritten code," Kress said, his eyes lighting up, "we can argue that the work was created during the marriage in the marital home, regardless of what some shell company contract says. It becomes marital property." "Better," Greg said, pulling out his phone. "If I have the physical proofs, I can sell them to the Volkovs tonight, before Blackwood can file his injunction." Greg dialed a number. "Get the car. We're going to the Tribeca penthouse. Now." 30 minutes later, the Rolls-Royce pulled up to a towering glass building on Fifth Avenue, the headquarters of Blackwood Holdings. Harrison escorted Natalie into the private elevator. "You'll stay in the penthouse suite here for a few days," he said, "until the security team sweeps your new townhouse." "I just want to sleep for a week," Natalie admitted. The elevator doors opened into a sleek, modern lobby. A woman in a sharp blazer was waiting for them. "Mr. Blackwood," she said urgently, "we have a problem." "Not now, Jessica." Harrison waved her off. "Get Natalie some tea." "Sir, it's the server logs," Jessica said, holding out a tablet. "Someone is accessing the Pembroke Dynamics mainframe. They're trying to download the source code." "Let them," Harrison scoffed. "We revoked the license. The code is encrypted. Without the key, it's gibberish." "That's the thing, sir," Jessica said, her face pale. "They have the key, the biometric override." Natalie froze. "Biometric, only 2 people have that. Me. And Greg," she whispered. "Greg doesn't have your retinas, Natalie," Harrison said. "No," Natalie said, her voice trembling. "But he has the safe." "What safe?" "In the Tribeca apartment," Natalie said, panic rising in her chest. "I left my old laptop in the wall safe. It has the master key. I didn't take it because I thought he didn't know the combination." "Does he?" Harrison asked sharply. It was our anniversary, Natalie said, tears welling up. 06/12/18. He never remembered our anniversary. I thought it was the safest number in the world because he never cared enough to know it. Harrison grabbed his phone. Security. Get a team to the Tribeca apartment immediately. It might be too late, Jessica said, pointing at the screen. The download is 90% complete, and the IP address isn't coming from the apartment. It's being routed to St. Petersburg. The Volkovs. Natalie felt the room spin. If the Russians got the source code, they wouldn't need her. They wouldn't need Greg. They would have the most powerful financial weapon in the world, and they would eliminate anyone who could claim ownership of it. He's selling it, Natalie realized. Greg is selling me out to the Russian mob right now. Harrison slammed his hand on the desk. We need to cut the hard line, crash the servers. We can't, Jessica said. If we crash the servers, we lose the evidence of the theft. We need to catch him doing it. Natalie looked at the screen. The progress bar hit 95%. I have to go back, Natalie said. Absolutely not, Harrison said. It's a war zone now. He won't expect me, Natalie said, a cold resolve settling over her. He thinks I'm the quiet girl who draws flowers. He thinks I'm weak. I need to go there and look him in the eye. Natalie, no, Harrison warned. But she was already walking back to the elevator. She turned, and for a moment, she looked just like her uncle, ruthless. Greg thinks he's selling a weapon, Natalie said. He doesn't know that I built a kill switch into the code. But I have to be within 50 feet of the primary router to activate it. I'm going to Tribeca. Harrison stared at her for a second, then grabbed his coat. Then I'm coming with you, and I'm bringing the gun. The elevator to the Tribeca penthouse opened directly into the living room. It was a private keycard access lift, a symbol of the exclusivity Greg Pembroke craved. But tonight, that elevator shaft was a throat, and Natalie and Harrison were the pills being swallowed whole. Harrison's security team had bypassed the lobby concierge with a flash of a badge and a subtle bribe, but up here, 70 stories above the wet streets of Manhattan, they were on their own. As the steel doors slid open, the sound of chaos hit them. The apartment, once a pristine showroom of minimalism, white leather couches, glass tables, abstract art that cost more than a house, was a wreck. Drawers had been pulled out and dumped on the floor. Cushions were slashed. It looked like a frantic animal had been hunting for food. In the center of the room, illuminated by the glow of 3 massive monitors set up on the dining table, was Greg. He looked manic. His tie was undone, his expensive shirt drenched in sweat. He was typing furiously on a sleek silver laptop, Natalie's old laptop, which was hardwired into the apartment's main fiber-optic line. Come on, you piece of junk!" Greg screamed at the screen. He didn't hear the elevator. Natalie stepped out first. The sight of him so desperate and small made her stomach turn. Not with fear, but with a sudden, sharp clarity. This was the man who had told her she was boring. This was the man who had told her she had no ambition. "It's not the laptop, Greg," Natalie said, her voice cutting through the room like a bell. "It's the encryption. It throttles the bandwidth if the biometric pulse isn't detected every 60 seconds. Greg spun around, knocking a bottle of scotch off the table. It shattered the amber liquid pooling on the white marble floor. "Natalie." His eyes darted to Harrison, then to the large man standing behind Harrison's head of security, a former Navy SEAL named Davies. Greg scrambled back, putting the table between them. "Stay back. I'll call the police. You're trespassing." "You're in my apartment, Greg," Natalie said, walking slowly toward him. "The lease is in my name. Remember. You made me sign it because you didn't want the credit check to show up on your records while you were courting investors. Greg laughed, a jagged, hysterical sound. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Look at the screen. Nat, look. He pointed a shaking finger at the center monitor. A progress bar was pulsing green. 98%. I sold it, Greg sneered. I closed the deal 10 minutes ago. The Volkov Group wired the first installment into a blind trust in the Seychelles. $50 million. And another 50 when the transfer completes. Harrison stepped forward, his face like granite. You are selling stolen property to international criminals, Greg. You are digging a grave so deep you'll never climb out. Stolen, Greg scoffed. She's my wife. It's community property. I'm just liquidating assets. He looked at Natalie, his eyes full of venom. You thought you could cut me out. You thought you could take my company. I made Pembroke Dynamics. I was the face. You were just the grim little coder in the back room. 99%. It's over, Greg whispered, triumph washing over his face. Transfer complete. The screen flashed. Upload successful. Greg threw his hands up in victory. Done. It's gone. It's on their servers in St. Petersburg now. You can sue me. You can arrest Gia. You arrest me. But you can't get it back. I'm rich and you're nothing. Natalie stopped walking. She was 10 feet away from the router. Close enough. She pulled her phone from her pocket. She didn't look angry. She looked sad. You really didn't read the documentation, did you, Greg? She asked softly. What documentation? The comments in the code, line 404, Natalie said. She tapped an icon on her phone. A simple black terminal window opened. The algorithm isn't just a trading bot, Greg. It's a neural network. It learns, and it protects itself. I built a fail-safe. If the code is transferred to an unauthorized server without the private key, Natalie pressed a single button on her screen. Execute. It doesn't just stop working, she finished. It inverts. On the monitors behind Greg, the green text suddenly turned blood red. Error. System compromised. Initiating purge protocol. Target host server. Greg spun around. What is that? What did you do? I triggered the kill switch, Natalie said calmly. But it's not just deleting the algorithm. It's scrubbing the host server. The Volkovs just downloaded a program that is currently erasing their entire database. Their banking records, their communication logs, their laundering schemes. It's all being overwritten with zeros. Greg stared at the screen. The upload bar was now a deletion bar moving with terrifying speed. Deletion in progress. 20%. 40%. No. Greg gasped. He hammered on the keyboard. Stop it. You can't stop it, Harrison said, his voice grim. It's a scorched earth protocol. You just didn't sell them a product, Greg. You mailed a bomb to the Russian mafia. Greg's phone sitting on the table began to ring. It wasn't a normal ringtone. It was the specific jarring chime he had assigned to his contact V. Greg stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Answer it, Greg, Harrison challenged. Tell Mr. Volkov why his empire is disappearing. Greg looked at Natalie. The arrogance was gone. In its place was sheer, unadulterated terror. He realized finally the magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just lost money. He had signed his own death warrant. Fix it, Greg begged, tears streaming down his face. Natalie, please. You have to reverse it. They'll kill me. They'll actually kill me. I can't reverse it, Natalie said. That's the point of a kill switch. The phone stopped ringing. Then a new sound cut through the silence of the penthouse. Ding. The elevator. Natalie turned. Harrison signaled to Davies, who immediately reached inside his jacket, his hand hovering over his holster. The elevator doors slid open. This time it wasn't family. 2 men stepped out. They were dressed in black leather jackets, rain dripping from their shoulders. They were thick-necked, heavy-set, with faces that looked like they had been chiseled out of concrete. Behind them stood a 3rd man. He was slender, wearing a beige trench coat, holding a wet umbrella. He had pale blue eyes and a scar running through his left eyebrow. Greg whimpered. "Victor!" Victor stepped into the room, collapsing his umbrella with a snap. He looked at the chaos. He looked at the red screens flashing deletion complete. Then he looked at Greg. "Gregory," Victor said. His voice was soft, heavily accented, and terrifyingly polite. "We have a technical difficulty. Our IT department says our systems are melting." Greg backed up until his legs hit the window ledge. "Victor, listen. It's a mistake. It's her. She did it. That woman there, she sabotaged the file." Greg pointed a shaking finger at Natalie. Victor turned his gaze to Natalie. He looked her up and down, dismissing her instantly. He looked at Harrison, assessing the threat, then at Davies. Victor's hand moved casually into his coat pocket. "A woman sabotaged the Pembroke algorithm," Victor asked, sounding amused. "The wife you said was, how did you put it, decoration? She's the coder," Greg screamed. "She's the genius. I stole it from her. She's the one destroying your servers. Kill her. And I can fix it, I promise." The betrayal hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Greg was offering Natalie's life to save his own skin. Harrison moved. He stepped directly in front of Natalie, shielding her with his body. Davies drew his weapon, aiming it at Victor's chest. The 2 Russian heavies instantly pulled submachine guns from under their jackets. The room became a Mexican standoff. "Nobody shoots," Harrison said, his voice calm but commanding. "Victor, I am Harrison Blackwood. You know my reputation. This man sold you stolen goods. The transaction is void. Walk away, and I won't have the FBI raiding your Brooklyn operations by sunrise." Victor smiled. It was a cold, dead smile. "Mr. Blackwood, I know you. You have much money. But money does not replace data. And Gregory here, he has cost us very much tonight." Victor looked at Greg. "But he says the woman is the key." "She is," Greg shouted. "Take her. She can reverse the code." Victor tilted his head. "Is this true, Devushka?" Natalie stepped out from behind Harrison. Harrison tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off. She walked forward until she was standing between the gunman and her ex-husband. She looked Victor in the eye, and then she spoke. "Vi kupili vozdukh, Victor." You bought air, Victor. Natalie's Russian was flawless, not the Russian of a tourist, but the sharp, clipped dialect of Moscow. Silence slammed into the room harder than the thunder rattling the windows. Greg's jaw dropped. "What?" Victor's eyebrows shot up. "You speak our tongue. Moya babushka baila iz Kazani." My grandmother was from Kazan. Natalie continued, her voice steady. "And I know who you are. You are Victor, the accountant, Sokolov. You handle the laundering for the Eastern Seaboard. And right now, thanks to the file Greg sent you, the encryption keys for your ledger are being broadcast to a dummy server." She took a step closer to the hitman. "I didn't just delete your data, Victor. I made a copy. If anything happens to me or my uncle, that copy goes automatically to the DEA, the FBI, and Interpol." Victor's smile faded. He wasn't looking at a scared housewife anymore. He was looking at a player. "You are bluffing," Victor said, though his grip on the umbrella tightened. "Am I?" Natalie asked. "Check your phone. I just sent you a sample, the routing numbers for the Cayman accounts you use to pay off the dock workers in New Jersey." Victor pulled out his phone. He glanced at the screen. His face went grey. He looked up at Natalie with a newfound respect and a dangerous intensity. "Smart," Victor murmured. "Very smart. Gregory said you were stupid." "Gregory is a bad judge of character." Victor turned slowly to Greg. Greg was hyperventilating. "Victor, don't listen to her. She's lying. I can get you the money. I have 50 million. The 50 million has been frozen," Harrison Blackwood interjected, checking his own phone. "My bank handles the transfers for the Seychelles Trust. I flagged the transaction as fraudulent 5 minutes ago. You have nothing, Greg." Greg looked around the room. The walls were closing in. He had no money, no company, no allies. And the Russian mob was standing in his living room with machine guns. He looked at the open safe in the wall. "I won't go to jail," Greg whispered, "and I won't let you win." Greg lunged. He didn't lunge for the door. He lunged for the open safe. "Gun!" Davies shouted. Greg pulled a snub-nosed .38 revolver from the safe. He didn't aim it at the Russians. He didn't aim it at Harrison. He swung the barrel wildly, his eyes locked on Natalie, the source of his humiliation, the woman who had been the architect of his success and was now the architect of his destruction. "It's your fault!" Greg screamed. Time seemed to slow down. Natalie saw the hammer of the gun pull back. She saw the madness in Greg's eyes. She couldn't move. Her feet felt nailed to the floor. Harrison moved. For a man of 65, he moved with the desperate speed of a father protecting his child. He threw himself sideways, shoving Natalie to the ground. Bang! The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Natalie hit the marble, hard, her head ringing. She scrambled up, screaming. "Harrison!" Harrison Blackwood was slumped against the white leather sofa. A dark red stain was blossoming rapidly on the shoulder of his charcoal suit. "Uncle!" Natalie cried, crawling to him. Greg stood there, the gun smoking in his hand, looking stunned by what he had done. He hadn't meant to shoot the billionaire. He wanted to hurt Natalie. I didn't," Greg stammered. The Russians hadn't moved. They were watching the domestic tragedy unfold with cold indifference. But then Davies, the security chief, roared. He didn't fire his weapon, too much risk of hitting Harrison. Instead, he tackled Greg. The two men crashed into the dining table. Monitors smashed to the floor. The glass table shattered. The gun skittered across the floor, spinning until it hit Victor's shoe. Victor looked down at the gun. Then he looked at Greg, who was being pinned by Davies. "We leave," Victor said to his men. "What?" one of the thugs asked. "The money." "There is no money here," Victor said, looking at Natalie, pressing her hands against Harrison's bleeding shoulder. "Only police, and they will be here in 2 minutes. Victor looked at Natalie one last time. "You have the leverage, Devushka. Keep the files safe. If you release them, then we return. And next time, I do not knock." The Russians vanished back into the elevator as quickly as they had arrived. "Harrison, stay with me," Natalie sobbed, applying pressure to the wound. "Look at me." Harrison grimaced, his face pale, but he managed a weak smile. It's okay, Nat. Shoulder. Just the shoulder. I've had worse in the boardroom." "You're going to be fine," Natalie said, her hands slick with his blood. She turned her head, her eyes searching for the man who did this. Davies hauled Greg to his feet. Greg's nose was broken blood, streaming down his face. He was limp, defeated, sobbing like a child. "Get him out of here," Natalie hissed. The sound was guttural, primal. "Get him out before I kill him myself. Police are in the lobby," Davies grunted, twisting Greg's arm behind his back. "He's done Miss Ford. He's going away for a long time. Attempted murder, grand larceny, fraud." Greg looked at Natalie through swollen eyes. "Nat, please." "My name," Natalie said, standing up, her dress stained with the blood of the only family she had left, "is Pembroke no longer. I am a Blackwood, and I never want to see your face again." Davies dragged Greg toward the stairs. The elevator was gone. Natalie turned back to Harrison. He was losing consciousness. "Help is coming," she whispered, stroking his forehead. "Just hold on." Harrison gripped her hand. The company," he wheezed. "Don't talk about business," Natalie said. "No." Harrison insisted, his grip tightening. "Greg, he wasn't alone. He's too stupid to call the Volkoffs himself. Someone brokered the deal." Natalie froze. "Who?" "Inside man." Harrison coughed. "Someone close to us. Trust no one." Harrison's eyes rolled back and he went limp. Harrison. Natalie checked his pulse. It was there, but faint. Sirens wailed from the street below, getting louder. The red and blue lights reflected off the rain-streaked windows, painting the ruined apartment in strobes of color. Natalie sat alone in the wreckage of her former life. Her husband was going to prison. Her uncle was dying. The Russian mafia knew her face, and somewhere hiding in the shadows was a traitor who had orchestrated it all. She looked at the shattered monitors on the floor. One screen was still flickering. It showed the email chain Greg had used to contact the Volkovs. Natalie reached over and wiped a smear of blood off the screen. She squinted at the forwarded by field. It wasn't a name she recognized immediately. It was a handle, an alias. King Fisher. Natalie's breath hitched. She knew that name. It wasn't a business associate. It wasn't a lawyer. It was the username of her best friend from college. The woman who had introduced her to Greg 5 years ago. The woman who was currently the CFO of Blackwood Holdings. The betrayal wasn't just in the marriage. It was in the foundation. Natalie stood up. The paramedics burst through the door as they swarmed Harrison. Natalie walked to the window and looked out at the city. She was done crying. She was done hiding. She picked up Greg's fallen gun from where Victor had left it. She popped the cylinder, checked the bullets, and snapped it back into place. The billionaire in the back row had spoken. Now it was time for the wife to scream. The waiting room of Mount Sinai Hospital smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. It was 3:00 a.m. Natalie sat in a hard plastic chair, still wearing the navy dress she'd worn to the divorce hearing 12 hours ago. It was ruined, stiff with the dried blood of the man who had raised her when the world forgot her. She hadn't spoken since the paramedics took Harrison away. Detective O'Connell, a weary-looking man with a rumpled suit, had tried for an hour to get a statement. "Mrs. Pembroke," O'Connell tried again, hovering over her with a notepad. "We need to understand the sequence of events. Your husband shot Mr. Blackwood. Was it domestic? Was it over assets?" Natalie finally looked up. Her eyes were dry and terrifyingly hollow. "My name is Miss Ford, and it wasn't domestic. It was corporate espionage gone wrong. My ex-husband was attempting to sell stolen proprietary algorithms to organized crime syndicates. Mr. Blackwood intervened. O'Connell blinked. Okay. That's a lot. And the Russians? The doorman said 4 men left in a hurry right after the shot. They were the buyers, Natalie said coldly. Viktor Sokolov. You'll find him in Brooklyn, though I doubt you have enough to hold him. He didn't pull the trigger. The detective looked uncomfortable. Miss Ford, you seem very calm for someone who just went through this. I cried for 5 years, Detective, Natalie said, standing up. She was shaking, but not from fear. From a vibrating kinetic rage that needed somewhere to go. I'm done crying. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. You can't leave. We need to process the scene at the penthouse. Davies is there, she said, nodding to the massive security chief standing by the door. He has the security footage. It shows everything. Greg shooting Harrison, the Russians, all of it. You have your slam dunk. Now let me do my job. She walked past him before he could protest. Davies fell in step beside her. How is he really? Natalie asked quietly as they reached the elevator. Davies' stone face cracked slightly. The bullet missed the artery, but it shattered the clavicle and clipped the lung. He's in a medically induced coma. The next 24 hours are critical. Natalie closed her eyes, leaning her forehead against the cold metal of the elevator door. Trust no one, Harrison had gasped. Take me to the tower, Natalie ordered. Miss Ford, it's middle of the night. You should rest. We have safe houses. The Tower Davies, Blackwood Holdings headquarters. Now. You think the threat is there? I know it is, Natalie said, opening her eyes. Harrison told me. The call is coming from inside the house. Blackwood Tower on 5th Avenue was a 60-story needle of glass and steel, a fortress of modern capitalism. At 4:00 a.m., the lobby was deserted, except for the night security team, who snapped to attention when Natalie walked in, flanked by Davies. She didn't look like a graphic designer anymore. Despite the ruined dress and the exhaustion etched into her face, she moved with Harrison Blackwood's stride, purposeful, inevitable. Lock down the building, Natalie told the head of night security. No one in or out without my personal authorization. Cut the keycards for all executive staff below C-suite level. Ma'am. On whose authority? The guard asked, bewildered. Natalie held up Harrison's personal key fob, which she'd taken from his pocket in the ambulance. It was a skeleton key to the entire Blackwood empire. Mine, she said. They took the private elevator to the 58th floor executive finance. The floor was dark, silent, save for the hum of the server stacks in the climate-controlled room at the center of the floor. Natalie walked past the rows of empty cubicles to a large corner office. The nameplate on the door read, Sarah Jenkins, Chief Financial Officer. Natalie stared at the name. Sarah. They had shared a dorm room freshman year. Sarah had held Natalie's hair back when she got sick from cheap vodka. Sarah had been the maid of honor at her wedding to Greg. It was Sarah who had jokingly suggested Greg, the charismatic business major, should date Natalie, the quiet computer nerd. It was never a joke, Natalie realized, a sick feeling settling in her gut. It was a setup from day one. Davies, Natalie said softly. Bring up the internal comms logs for the last month. Filter for external IPs originating from St. Petersburg, and cross-reference them with Sarah Jenkins's terminal. Davies tapped on a tablet. A moment later, his breath hitched. Jesus! It's a constant stream. Encrypted messages, wire transfers disguised as vendor payments. It's not just the Pembroke deal. She's been funneling Blackwood capital to Sokolov's shell companies for 6 months. Natalie pushed open the door to Sarah's office. It smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. On the desk sat a framed photo of Sarah and Natalie at graduation, smiling arms around each other. Natalie picked up the photo and threw it against the wall. Glass shattered. "She wasn't just helping Greg," Natalie whispered. "Greg was the distraction. She was helping Victor hollow out Harrison's company from the inside." The elevator dinged out in the hallway. Natalie and Davies spun around. It was 4:30 a.m. No one should be here. The doors opened, and Sarah Jenkins stepped out. She was impeccably dressed in a cream-colored power suit, holding a lukewarm latte. She stopped dead when she saw Natalie standing in her doorway, flanked by the head of security. Sarah didn't look surprised. She just looked annoyed, like she'd been caught cutting in line. "Well," Sarah said, taking a slow sip of her coffee. "I heard about the fireworks in Tribeca. I assumed you'd be weeping at the hospital by now, Nat. You always were predictable." "And you?" Natalie said, her voice unrecognizable in its icy calmness. "Were always jealous. Hello, Kingfisher." Sarah Jenkins didn't flinch at the code name. She walked calmly into her office, stepping over the broken glass of their friendship photo without glancing down. She placed her latte on the desk and sat in her high-backed leather chair, interlocking her fingers. "Kingfisher," Sarah mused. "I always liked that handle. Efficient predator. Patience. Strikes when the water is calm." "Why, Sarah?" Natalie asked. She wasn't screaming. She felt dead inside, a numbness that was slowly being replaced by cold calculation. "Harrison paid for your MBA. He gave you this job at 30. You were family. I was the help." Sarah spat the veneer of corporate cool cracking for a second. "I was the scholarship kid you allowed into your circle. You the secret heiress pretending to be poor little orphaned Natalie. And Harrison playing the benevolent god." She leaned forward, her eyes glittering with years of accumulated resentment. "I ran the numbers, Nat. I made this company billions. And what did I get? A nice salary and a pat on the head. While Harrison planned to leave it all to you, the girl who just wanted to draw pictures and play house with that moron Greg." "So you used Greg," Natalie said. "Greg was a useful idiot. Easiest mark I ever saw. All ego, no brain. I introduced you two knowing he'd eventually try to screw you over. I just needed to wait for the right moment to wind him up and point him at Harrison's assets." Sarah laughed bitterly. "I honestly didn't think you had it in you to fight back in court today. I thought you'd fold Greg would get the IP and I'd help him sell it to Victor, and then we'd short Pembroke stock and make a killing. Simple." "But Harrison showed up," Natalie stated. "The old man always has to play hero," Sarah sneered. "But it worked out better this way. Greg is going to prison for attempted murder. Harrison is dying in a coma. And you—" Sarah pressed a button under her desk. A silent alarm. "You are trespassing on corporate property, threatening an executive after a highly traumatic night. You're unstable, Natalie. Everyone knows how fragile you were during the marriage." "You think you can spin this?" Natalie asked incredulously. "Davies has the logs. We know you're laundering money for the Russians." Sarah smiled. It was a terrifying smile, devoid of any warmth. "Davies works for Blackwood Holdings, and as of an hour ago, when the board was notified of Harrison's incapacitation, I am the acting CEO per the emergency bylaws. Davies works for me now." She looked at the massive security chief. "Davies, Ms. Ford is hysterical and dangerous. Remove her from the building. If she resists, detain her until the police arrive. We can't have her damaging company property." Davies didn't move. He looked from Sarah to Natalie, his jaw set like concrete. "Did you hear me, Davies?" Sarah snapped. Your employment contract is very specific about insubordination. Davies slowly reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his badge and his company handgun. He placed them gently on Sarah's desk. "I don't work for contracts, Ms. Jenkins," Davies growled. "I work for loyalty, and I was with Harrison in Kandahar before you were born. I'm with her." He moved to stand shoulder to shoulder with Natalie. Sarah's composure faltered. She looked at her phone, her thumb hovering over a speed dial. "Go ahead," Natalie challenged. "Call them. Call Victor. Tell him his inside woman just lost control of the building." "You don't know what you're playing with, Natalie," Sarah hissed, her voice dropping. "Victor isn't just a mobster. He's a broker for people you don't want to know exist. They want the Blackwood infrastructure. They want the data mining capabilities Harrison built. And they will burn this city down to get it." "They already tried to burn me down tonight," Natalie said. She reached into the pocket of her trench coat. Sarah flinched, thinking it was another gun. Instead, Natalie pulled out a small encrypted flash drive, the backup of the leverage file she had threatened Victor with in the penthouse. "You were right about one thing, Sarah," Natalie said, walking around the desk until she was looming over her former best friend. "I was fragile. I was quiet. Because I had something to lose. I had a husband I loved. I had an uncle who protected me." She leaned down, her face inches from Sarah's. "Greg is gone. Harrison might die. I have nothing left to lose. Which means I have nothing left to fear." Natalie jammed the flash drive into Sarah's computer. "What are you doing?" Sarah demanded, trying to grab the laptop. Davies pushed her back into her chair. Natalie's fingers flew across the keyboard. She wasn't a graphic designer now. She was the coder who had built a billion-dollar algorithm in her sleep. "Victor, back off, because I threatened to release his dirty laundry to the feds," Natalie said, her eyes reflecting the blue light of the screen. "But you're worse than him. You're a traitor." She hit enter. "I'm not sending your files to the FBI, Sarah. They're too slow." On the screen, a massive data transfer initiated. "Where are you sending it?" Sarah whispered, true panic finally setting in. "The dark web," Natalie said coldly. "WikiLeaks, every major financial news outlet on the planet, and, just for fun, the unsecured inbox of Viktor Sokolov's chief rival in the Moscow syndicate." Sarah went pale. "You can't. Victor will think I double-crossed him. He'll kill me." "Then you better start running," Natalie said, pulling the drive out. "Because the upload completes in 3 minutes, and I just reactivated your building keycard. You have exactly enough time to get to the street before the news breaks that the acting CEO of Blackwood Holdings is a Russian asset." Sarah stared at her for 1 second, seeing the absolute lack of mercy in Natalie's eyes. Then she grabbed her purse and bolted out the door, the click of her expensive heels echoing down the hallway like gunfire. Natalie watched her go. She felt a profound exhaustion settle over her, but also a strange, cold clarity. She sat down in Sarah's chair, the acting CEO's chair. She looked at Davies. "We need to prepare," Natalie said. "For the police?" Davies asked. "No." Natalie turned her chair to face the window, looking out at the city lights, struggling against the pre-dawn darkness. "Sarah is burned. Victor knows I have the data. He won't send lawyers next time. He's going to send an army." She placed her hand on the desk, feeling the hum of the building beneath her. Her building. Let them come. 3 months later. The visitation room at Rikers Island was cold, smelling of bleach and despair. Greg Pembroke sat behind the plexiglass, looking 10 years older. His head was shaved, and the arrogance that had defined his life was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his left eye. He picked up the phone. On the other side sat Simon Kress, his former lawyer. "Did she come?" Greg asked, his voice cracking. "Did she get my letters?" Kress shook his head, closing his briefcase. "She didn't come, Greg, and she's not coming. I was told explicitly by Blackwood's legal team that any further contact will be met with a harassment suit that will add 5 years to your sentence." Greg slumped against the wall. I just wanted to tell her I'm sorry." "It doesn't matter," Kress said, standing up. "She's not listening anymore. She's busy." Across the river, in the penthouse office of Blackwood Tower, the morning sun gleamed off the glass. Harrison Blackwood sat in a wheelchair by the window, a cane resting on his knees. He was thinner, his shoulder still in a sling, but his eyes were sharp. "The board is ready for you," Harrison said, turning his chair around. Natalie stood at the head of the massive mahogany table. She wasn't wearing the floral dresses Greg used to pick out for her. She was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, tailored to perfection. Her hair was cut in a sharp, angled bob. She looked at the empty seat at the far end of the table, the seat where Sarah Jenkins used to sit, before she vanished into the chaotic underworld of Eastern Europe, running from enemies she couldn't pay. Natalie looked down at the agenda. Pembroke Dynamics had been absorbed, stripped for parts, and rebuilt as a cybersecurity division of Blackwood Holdings. The kill switch algorithm was now the most sought-after defense program in the world. "Are you nervous?" Harrison asked. Natalie picked up her pen, the heavy, expensive fountain pen that used to intimidate her. "No," she said. She walked to the double doors of the boardroom. She didn't push them open hesitantly. She didn't wait for permission. "Greg used to hate my silence," Natalie said, looking at her reflection in the glass. "He thought it was weakness. He didn't realize that silence is just the sound of someone reloading." She pushed the doors open. 20 executives stood up in unison. Natalie Ford, no Natalie Blackwood, didn't say hello. She simply walked to the head of the table, sat down, and looked at the men who ran the world. "Let's begin," she said. And the room went silent to listen. And that is the story of how the quiet wife in the courtroom became the most dangerous CEO in New York. Greg lost his fortune. Sarah lost her life on the run, and Natalie found her voice. What did you think of Natalie's transformation? Do you think she should have visited Greg one last time, or was silence the perfect revenge? I want to see your debates in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of betrayal and justice, please smash that like button. It helps the channel immensely. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next story, where we uncover the secrets of a billionaire who left his entire fortune to his cat, and the family who tried to kill for it. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you silence. They might just be reloading.